Segun is a 22-year-old Nigerian. He attempted to take his own life over failure to make the cutoff mark in the recently concluded university's matriculation examination. This was after securing a sponsor to see him through his educational pursuit. To make matters worse, Segun actually streamed his suicide attempt live on social media, causing panic. Chukwuemeka Akachi, a 400-level student of the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and 17-year-old Temitope Saka in Lagos were not so lucky. Their demise has no doubt left a trail of sadness, especially for those left behind. These are a few instances of the growing cases of suicide in Nigeria, all reportedly happening in recent times. The World Health Organization puts the figure of people who died due to suicide at about 800,000 globally, which translates to one person every 40 seconds. Here in Nigeria, demographic analysis points to the Nigerian youth. From economic pressure to social pressure, experts believe that most suicide cases are induced by self-imposed expectations. They argue that the concept of suicide is alien to Nigeria.
Let us lower our expectation about life, about everything. Some people believe the moment I have my degree, I will work in NNPC, I will work in Central Bank. The more you begin to seek for employment, those on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, before you know it, things are turning upside down.
So, why the recent increase in suicide cases? What could be done to mitigate it? Is there a role for religious organizations? What about psychiatrists and psychologists? These are some of the questions that guests in the studios will attempt to answer.
All right, Victor Aziz, thank you very much there for that background. We are expecting a psychiatrist to join us in the course of this conversation from our Lagos Network Center. But already here with us in the studios, we have with us Dr. Law Mefo. Is a forensic and social psychologist, a regular face on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Dr. Law Mefo, pleasure to have you again.
Thank you, my brother.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios, we'd like to welcome Professor Tafiq Abdul Aziz. Is the Chief Imam of the University of Abuja Muslim Community. Professor Abdul Aziz, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. As I indicated, we're expecting a psychiatrist to join us at our Lagos Network Center. And once he comes into the studios, we'll introduce him as well. But let's begin from the psychological perspective. Dr. Law Mefo, I'm sure you've read some of the recent incidents, read about the recent incidents of suicide, particularly among young persons. I mean, there was a steward who hung himself on a tree in the government house in Maiduguri some weeks ago, and the students, 300 level, 400 level, boys and girls.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, it's a very disturbing trend, and we must all feel concerned and do something urgent to arrest it. First, I must admit that suicide is not entirely new. It's always been there. But there is an upsurge, in Nigeria at the moment. We can't deny that. And in the past, it was more with the older generation, the older persons. But now it's coming down, catching up with the school-going age of 19 to 30, and that should be a serious cause for concern. We need to first get the issue, in perspective, right? Suicide, taking one's life, right? And it has a whole cycle. It starts with the thoughts, what we may call suicidal ideation, the thoughts, the contemplation of taking one's life. Then the next level is actually taking, taking action to complete the cycle. Many people, it will surprise you, the number of people that actually think of suicide. Do you understand that? The statistics is staggering. But not up to 10% of them attempt and then complete the process, because you can attempt and not complete. Now, if you want to look at why one would be thinking of that, it comes from 3 levels. One is you. People say pressure, poverty, money. No, these are mediating factors. It's how you respond to those things that is actually the causative factor. If it's poverty, then most of us would have died, right?
Not you.
Do you understand that? So it's how we respond to such situation. That is where the problem is. Now, you also have the problem of, the man that spoke identified one important point. The way we evaluate our fortunes and misfortunes. Unrealistic standards. When you begin to look at your life from another person's perspective, we are not all wired the same way. Some are early bloomers, some are late bloomers, some did, in fact, some may arrive a lot earlier than others. In fact, the way we start life is not at the same point. We have our internal makeups, our psychological makeups, intelligence, the way we were built, our temperaments, right?
And capacity.
Capacity. And more importantly, the environment itself. We are born mostly potentialities. It is the environment that will bring that out. We are not all exposed to the same environment. Family background, for example. Your parents may not be as well to do as your friends' parents. And, that can lead to the two of you attending different schools. One may attend private, one may attend public schools. They are all schools, but the capacity of those schools are not differing. What that means is that, what that means is that the preparedness of each and every one of us to confront life and really live it will not be the same, using her word again, capacity. Capacity is not, all inborn. Up to 50% of that, perhaps more, would have to come from the environment itself. So we need to understand where we are coming from and then know how far we can go. There are some psychological makeups that will never allow you to do certain things. For example, if you are not good in sciences, mathematics, physics, why must you insist on being an engineer? Do you understand what I'm saying? So why don't you identify the areas where you have inherent comparative advantage and focus on that? Because the more you try to become what you are not and what you may probably never become, the more frustrating life would become. These are some of the issues. And those of us who are caregivers, significant others, parents, even churches, I don't know much about Islam, but the kind of preaching you hear in the church puts on undue pressure on the individual. Poverty is not your portion. Look, let me tell you, wealth is not the only measure of success.
Absolutely.
Wealth in itself is not even an end. But the way it is preached now, that if you are not rich, then you are not spiritual. It takes people out of their way to begin to try certain things in order to meet up with what you call societal expectations. These societal expectations are real. Your parents, for example, can insist that you must be a medical doctor, that you must be a lawyer. They haven't thought through whether you really have the aptitude. In psychology, that's what we call aptitude. Aptitude is fundamental. Without underlying attitude, you will have to struggle. You hear of a student, that couldn't pass the medical, final medical exam, taking his life. Are you sure that that guy ought to have been a medical doctor in the first place?
No, medical student.
These are some of the problems. And we need to get down to the drawing board and apportion blames where we must. Parents must must take back a bit of this pressure they bring upon their children, upon their words. Olodo, right?
Don't.
Unprintable names. You call you put your child on the spot without actually finding out what exactly is going on. And some of these things are bottled up by the child and not having any other person to run to. Don't forget that the family you see there is the sanctuary, is the last line of defense for the individual. So if the family becomes a problem to the child, then there is a big problem and suicide becomes an option, whether you like it or not, because they have no other place to go to. And when they come home, they don't meet the succor. They don't have a shoulder to lean on. They can't even complain about what is going on in school. Some students ought to change their courses, but their parents may not agree. I don't know if you saw what I'm saying.
Yes.
And it becomes inevitable only when the individual drops out of school, right? Completely. Do you know some students drop out of school even without their parents knowing?
Yes.
And you still believe that they're in the university? They are not, for no fault of theirs, essentially coming from the background they are coming from, because we haven't done our job properly. I mentioned the individual. He has to take responsibility. He has to evaluate his capacity, the environment, and know the way to go. I am not advocating that the individual will have to take the easy way out, but you have to go for where you have maximum potentiality. That is what life is. You don't have to be a medical doctor, a lawyer to become successful or happy. In fact, there are emerging fields now that are far more exotic, paying far more in ICT, in all spheres of life. We need to broaden our horizon. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Exactly.
All right, Lord thank you very much. Let's bring in Professor Tafiq Abdul-Aziz. Professor Abdul-Aziz, considering the frequency of reports of suicide cases, what will be your response in evaluating what's playing out in the Nigerian society?
Thank you very much. I will say that it is a reaction, not response. Response is positive, is evaluative, is an attempt to assess the situation, understand yourself, understand your situation, and take positive action. But reaction is violent response. It's a reaction to systemic failure. It's a reaction to leadership failure. Leadership failure in many respects. The first and the fundamental is parenting. The parents do not know their children. The parents have misplaced value. Parents do not know anything about life, and they can't know. Parents use their children to compete with one another. Parents place unrealistic values before their children. Parents do not show any example. Parents are absent. Parents are outside there pursuing life, running a rat race, and then living unrealistic lives, and then coming back home to place unrealistic expectations, goals, and expected outcomes before children that did not prepare for failure. If you notice, this suicide does not affect the downtrodden. It doesn't affect the uneducated people. It doesn't affect the poor, because they are suffering from another kind of systemic failure. They are being told...
He that is down need fear no fall.
Yeah, they have been told that God will do everything. And whatever you suffer, it is God that has ordained your suffering. So they accept their fate. So they don't contemplate suicide. But the pseudo-elite, those who have gone to school, those who have been told that education is key to success, those who have been told by priests that God can do everything for you. You can come and take your miracle and make it. Failure is not your portion, like my colleague said. Those who have said, who have preached prosperity, who have told them that once you go to school, you get education. Once you get education, you get a good job. Once you get a good job, you get a good life. Those who have been deceived into all this, these are the people that cause all the problem. However, which leadership failed woefully? Religious leadership. If you're talking about the polity, you're talking about politics, you're talking about economy, you're talking about poverty, all the operators of this, lie behind imams on Friday, go before pastors on Sundays. What do they preach? What do we, religious leaders, preach to people? Do we not encourage them to run rat race so that we get our cut from it? What do they preach to politicians? When they fight for political appointment, when they try to make people get appointments, when they mobilize, when they lobby, is it not because they are going to get percentage of the income? Are they not sending politicians on errand of looting and corruption? So religious leaders should be blamed for corruption. If corruption is the cause of all this trouble, religious leaders should be blamed for that corruption. If we blame the traditional rulers, we blame the students, the parents. Do these parents not go to mosques and churches? What do they go there to hear of? What is the focus of their struggle? They struggle in order to make it so that the priest will gain from it. So the priest also pray for them so that they will become more prosperous, so that they will gain from them. When we fight over political appointment, is it for good? When we say Muslim must be there, Christian must be there, there is Islamization, there is Fulanization, is it for good? The kidnappers, are they not being prayed for by priests? I'm talking from experience. My brothers have been kidnapped 3 times. And those who kidnapped them pray along with them. They were Muslims like the kidnapped victims. And one of them had the gut, the temerity to tell his victim that they have a malam that was praying for them. All the criminals have priests behind them. So in what way can we blame any other person apart from the priests? So education has collapsed because it puts 2 negative thinkings in our heads. Entitlement mentality. Once I have a certificate, I'm entitled to a share of the national wealth. Slave mentality. Whatever comes from them is correct. That is why we are not interrogating democracy. That is the major cause of our problem. We are not interrogating education schooling without education. The system. There is no way we can deploy education. We can't teach anybody anything because everybody comes to get a piece of paper as an evidence that I'm entitled to a share of the wealth. But in all this, what are the religious leaders teaching us? Are we telling the people to take care of the homes? Because anybody that goes out there to commit suicide comes from a home. And once you get frustrated, once you fail to achieve a particular aim, then you can commit suicide. Basically, what we fail to look at is the effect of drugs in all this. Drug addiction is a manifestation of systemic failure and leadership failure. The drug dealers, the peddlers, the courier, the taker are all in a negative, satanic economic chain. And the chain is not complete without the taker. And everybody that benefits from it goes back to thank God for prosperity. And nobody tells anybody that this is wrong. The blame against goes back to the religious leaders. Our children are taking drugs, but we don't know, and we don't care. And we can't care because we don't have the time. We are also running helter-skelter to make it. Some of the parents also take drugs. Some of the drugs that the children take are remnants of what the parents take. The other thing is the relationship between drug and cultism. Some of the children that are into cults are taken after their parents. Religious organizations are also like cults. They are run like cults. So frustration, everything you can think of is just a manifestation of systemic failure and leadership failure. And the ultimate people that failed are the religious leaders.
Thank you, Professor Tafiq. Abdul Aziz, you've really raised some pertinent questions. We'll be joining our Lagos guest now, who is Dr. Tony Sunbae. He's a psychiatrist from Yaba Psychiatric Hospital. We'll be getting back to him after we take this break. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us again. And I'm introducing now Reverend Father Silvano who has just joined us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And I will go. My question is directed at Dr. Tony Sunbae, psychiatrist from Yaba Psychiatric Hospital. You know, you've been watching, you've been listening to what has been said earlier. Let's have your opening comments on the topic.
Maybe I should quickly say that I am a psychologist, not a psychiatrist. I'm talking about blame. I think what psychologists do, rather than blame, which is judgmental, is to find solution to the issues or problems. So for saying that there is a systemic collapse, yes, but what can we do? What led us to this stage? Where are we now? Which way forward? That should be the thinking of a psychologist of my leaning. And to answer the question that I have posed, I think we should look at parenting, which is the home. Some parents are not there. Some parents are absentee parents. Some mothers are better fathers. Some fathers are better mothers. Some fathers are better father mothers. Some mothers are better mother fathers. And some parents have no business with parenting at all. These are issues that we need to look at. Along the line, it is about individual making contributions into the system. Parents will have a primary role, which psychologists will look at between nature and nurture. The nature is the genetic presentation or inheritance by the offspring. Then the nurture goes beyond the home. Just like Professor Tafiq had mentioned, the churches, the mosque, traditional religious community, the society, neighborhood, and things like that. All these add up to what we call nurturing. The school system, what type of education, what type of society, what type of family. These are dynamics that add up to what an individual is likely to do with himself or herself. And while Professor Tafiq was talking, he mentioned that depression or suicide doesn't happen in the low socioeconomic bracket, which I take aversion to. It's just like saying that medical doctors don't get sick. I think that is not too generally acceptable. What we can say is like more commonly, because of underreporting, we do not have the records of low socioeconomic members in that bracket reporting suicide. And suicide seems trending in Nigeria essentially because of over-publicity. Trust Nigerians. If you open a barbing salon in your neighborhood and it seems gaining attention or attraction or publicity, everybody or the next door neighbor, including Jack Robinson, will want to open a barbing salon. So these are issues of concern that we need to look at. For me, I will recommend that we reduce the publicity that we give suicide and suicidal issues so that it doesn't look like Nigeria is a den of suicidality and things like that. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your opening comments. But just before we bring in the third guest who just joined us a while ago, explain some more why you think that publicity given to suicide cases could then become an incentive for others to be imitators. How does that play out? There are instances now where you have multimedia access, and so if it is not there in the traditional regular media, people will find it on the social media. Cases that we have seen recently are virtually unrelated. On campuses, love relationship gone sour, University of Benin, 300 level medical student at Niger Delta University, and University of Nigeria, Nsukka, a student of English, 400 level. And then you go up north in Borno, that's Chief Steward, the government house, hanging himself on a tree. So what has publicity got to do with that?
Hosting the Nigeria 99 World Cup, we should just stop the publicity given the OG demand eater. And lo and behold, as soon as that was taken to, the rest is history. I think we hosted the Nigeria 99 World Cup. So this is my take. Once you do not flame negative things or things in any manner, people will tend not to buy into it. It's just like we should be talking on how do we reduce suicide, suicidality, suicidal ideations, and that is essentially what the Nigerian Psychological Association is doing by coming up with Nigerian Psychological Association Bill, so that there will be regulation, so that the activity and services of psychologists will be available, so that Nigerians will have free access and pride to say, I want to go and see my psychologist. The life of those communities that are getting better or that we perceive as better are such societies that make psychological services available and affordable. So these are issues of concern. It is not essentially that once we don't come on TV stations like this, we cannot short-circuit it. Let us stop posting or reposting all issues or ideas about suicide. And so we will depopularize it. I thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Sunbae. Now let's bring in now Reverend Father Silvano, who is of the Catholic Archdiocese of Abuja. But Reverend Father let's have your take on what's playing out with regard to the frequent cases of reported suicide in the country. A few years ago, where we took on this same topic, and we had what apparently was an epidemic of persons leaping off the Third Mainland Bridge into the lagoon.
I was reading the publication of Punch newspaper of May 19th, 2009, the online version actually.
2019?
Yes, 2019. And it was something on suicide happening in Nigeria. And it was shocking to me that there was so much of the rate of suicide, that much more than I thought. And there was a whole list of persons across the length and breadth of Nigeria who have committed suicide for various reasons. For various reasons. And at the point, I couldn't even continue with the report. I was becoming emotional about the whole thing. And I had to discontinue reading that report. And I kept asking myself, the reasons that are given are diverse. Why they committed suicide. Some for failure in business, some for failure in family life, some they felt unloved, some for failure in their academics and all of those kind of things. And I kept asking, is that the way out? Is that the way out? Now my thought on this is, when people, I know that it is not an easy decision to make. And I'm not wanting to believe that people come to that decision in just a moment. There's always a build-up before they make that final decision to take suicide as an escape route. And What this shows is that there is an expression of lack of faith and lack of hope. Faith in God, who is able to do all things for us, and hope in a better, brighter future. And people think that by taking the option of suicide, they escape all of their problems. But then it is true, they may escape the physical problems that they are having to battle with, but they have created also a problem for society. And that's the reason why we are even gathered here talking about suicide today, so that we can tell others outside that suicide is not the option. It is true that we are faced with challenges, but how does taking our life put an end to the challenge? It does not. Sometimes people who are suicidal and have this tendency, they have bottled in a whole lot of problems. And just like the balloon that keeps swelling, they just burst open. But if you go to check, most likely they've not been able to talk to somebody. They've not opened up to anybody. And they just keep swelling and swelling and swelling until they can't take it anymore. And societal factors have also not helped us. For example, you say you want to see a psychologist, people begin to look at you like, are you okay? You must have some mental problems to see a psychologist, but that's not actually the case. The pressures of society also is not helping us. The professor was talking about the contributing factor of society, putting pressure on people, wanting to be like others. And when eventually it is not playing out as you hope, you think that you are a failure. But that's really not the case. All of us have been created differently. We have different missions on this earth. We have different destinies. So we must be ready and willing and make ourselves capable of dealing with the situations that we find ourselves in. And when it becomes difficult for us to handle it alone, it won't be a bad idea to talk to someone.
Talk to someone. This is the second or third time you are using that expression.
Yeah.
Whom do you talk to? Now, you are here, Professor Tafiq Aziz is also here. Assuming the individual is religious, to whom can he lay his problems before so that he gets dissuaded from that suicidal instinct? And in the church, for instance, how much of this comes on, and how much of a skill, for instance, does a priest have to sway a potential suicide from that option?
Okay. First, before you are able to open up to someone, there must be an element of trust. You won't just talk to anybody. You must trust the person that you are talking to, and also be hopeful that this person will, number one, give you a listening ear, and number two, help you positively. It's not all of your problems you discuss with just anybody.
That's true.
You have to identify who you can talk to. Even as a religious person, you may not necessarily feel inclined to talk to a religious leader if you don't feel that you will get help from there. You can even talk to a bosom friend or a relative. So first, we must know that there are people that we can approach, and always they are there. As far as we relate with people, we know those who will always listen to us. We will always know such people who will listen to us and who will be ready and willing to support us and journey with us irrespective of the challenges that we are battling with in life. There are always those kind of people. But the failure to open up is what leads to the accumulation of pressures from outside and from inside that will lead to the point where people become depressed, and then they begin to consider suicide as an option. And you asked the question of how much skill the priest has, for example, in dealing with such issues. Every Catholic priest does a training on spiritual direction and counseling. There are others who take it a step further to become professionals in those fields, but at least you have the basic tools of dealing with all manner of issues that people can bring to you. Basic skills in counseling, basic skill in spiritual direction. And spiritual direction basically is about journeying with people through life, through the different issues of life. You know that we are all humans, we are all struggling, and people do not actually need you sometimes to provide a solution to their problems, but they just need someone to walk by them. That mental imagery that there is someone that is beside me giving me support is enough for some persons to give them strength. So every Catholic priest has that training. It is something you must undergo before you finish your training in the seminary to become a priest. So that when you meet such situations, you will be able to deal with it. Most of the work we do, it's about helping people through life. And so that training is a very vital part. That aspect of our training is a very vital necessity for all of us as Catholic priests. So yes, there is always that skill, that technique, that knowledge of how to help people who have this suicidal tendency to see that life is what much more than the problems that they are dealing with.
Thank you, Reverend Father Silvano. I will now be coming to Professor Tafiq. You know, it all boils down to communication and the ability to listen and see the telltale signs of depression, or if the person is moving from normal to abnormal to a disorder that he cannot control. And suicide has always been a taboo in all religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, and all that.
Even traditional religion. Yes,
traditionally it has been a taboo, because when we read books about the past, we see when a person dies, he's taken to the evil forest, or the stigmatization to the family after it happens. How do they overcome this kind of stigmatization, and how do you tell the telltale sign of somebody wanting to commit suicide? How do you listen? How do you communicate in both religions? Let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, in Islam, like you said, it is haram. It is a taboo. It's prohibited to take your life. And the Prophet was prayed to have said what means whoever takes his own life will be continuously punished with the means of taking his life till the day of judgment, and we go to hell. But then, like I've said before, the basic cause of this is what I call pandemic ignorance, being showcased as knowledge and expertise. A parent that ought to be a teacher, a primary counselor, the primary psychologist, goes to school, gets a certificate, gets a job, gets busy, and abandons his responsibility. So he's displaying ignorance. He does not know when his child becomes an addict. He does not know when the child develops certain problems. He does not know when the child begins to contemplate suicide. He is not available. The wife is not available. The father is not available. The mother is not available. There are no peer groups. When we were growing up, we did not discriminate. Every child is a child of the community. The community is absent. There is no connection. There is contact. We could be together, husband and wife sitting on a sofa and communicating with different people 100 miles away. Social media madness. You know, we are parading ignorance as knowledge. So this is the first way to solve this problem. We will not avoid stigmatization because we are not approaching the problem correctly. So it must start from the parents. Again, this failure, we go back to the religious leaders who pose as experts, specialists. They know everything because they know God. God can do everything. To the extent that when power is taken away, we ask God to restore power instead of asking man. When power is restored, we say, thank God. We have become so religious. We feel everywhere with religiosity, no space for God. So in the homes, they reduce everything to prayer. Let us pray. And when the problems come frontally, they go to the priest, the ignorant priest, the mischievous priest, the 419 priest, to report an incident that they ought to have discovered, that they ought to have sat down to investigate, to interrogate, to apportion blames appropriately, to blame themselves for causing this, especially for being absent, for being ignorant. They take it to a commercial priest, somebody who is waiting for you to bring a problem and is going to survive based on your problem. There's no way you can solve that problem, because solving that problem means cutting off the means of income. So a commercial religion is the basic problem we have in this country. And unless we address that, we continue to wallow in this trouble. They themselves, the priest, will start the stigmatization. Say, hey, this family doesn't have faith. That is why they are suffering like that. That is why God is punishing them with this. We have to find a way of restructuring our education so that it stops being colonial, so that it stops giving us unnecessary hope, so that the education becomes functional. If education becomes functional, somebody will not sit down and say his only work is to minister to the spiritual needs of the people. And that I pay you to worship God, and you collect my money to worship the same God. It doesn't add up. So the stigmatization starts from home, starts from the environment, and once a man of God, a so-called man of God, pronounces anything, it becomes the absolute truth. We call it gospel truth because it's coming from a man of God. So once we continue to doggishly, slavishly, and uninterrogatively follow religious people, especially commercial priests, we're not likely to get out of this trouble. But we can't get out of this. We can't solve this problem unless we have functional education. This education we have today does not allow anybody to function in society. For example, I'm a professor of English. None of my children will read English. Why? Because without government employment, you can't function with English. What does English make you to become? Learning English does not make you a specialist. It does not put anything in your brain. You can't work with it.
Who says?
I say.
But there are graduates of English who work in the media.
Yes.
Yes.
That is an employment. You can't do anything on your own as a graduate of English. What can you do on your own?
You can.
It's not a profession.
No, hang on a second. Hang on a second. You can provide editorial services. You can write speeches for people, do all kinds of things. Be a book editor.
At what point? Not at the point of graduation.
You
have to have additional training.
Yes.
Here is a professional training. You are not going to provide editorial services as a fresh graduate. But as a graduate of agriculture, you can start farming. As a graduate of computer science, you can start an ICT outfit. As a graduate of veterinary medicine, you can open a clinic.
All things being equal.
All the things being equal.
Yeah, all things being equal.
Other things being equal.
Yes.
It boils down to parental consciousness.
Yes.
What does the parent who sends his child to an expensive university? Let me answer.
No, Prof. I'm going to ask you to say this one because let's not drift. I understand the point that you are making, but what is the purpose of education?
It is to change your thinking and make a better person out of you.
Precisely. For you first to be useful to yourself.
Yes.
Before you are then useful to your family and to the society.
And because it is not functional, it has failed. That is why every graduate runs from pillar to post for 3, 4, 5 years looking for a job. If the education has not failed, any graduate at all can start doing things on his own.
But there are people who are doing that already. Maybe you are not aware.
I'm aware.
Yes.
I have a son who read industrial chemistry and is into interior decoration, is into computer, is into so many things. He is multi-talented.
Did you choose the study for him?
I didn't.
Or he went on his own?
He went on his own, and he never bothered anybody about looking for a job. His elder brother is a teacher and he's also looking for another job. I laugh at him anytime. Anytime I told him, yeah, I'm not going to use any connection to get a job. Look at your brother. Look at me. I'm a professor of English. I'm a farmer. I have a fish farm. I have other things.
So you speak English to your fish or something?
Because this English does not fetch me anything.
What you're trying to say is diversification is key.
Diversification.
Professor Abdulaziz.
Education should make you a functional person.
Professor Abdulaziz,
Yes.
let's pause you in the meantime. And we will return to you because part of what you are describing has to do with the social milieu that may be a predisposing factor to suicide. Let's bring in again Dr. Lawmefo. Dr. Lawmefo, I mean, we've talked about the social factors that could conduce to this. There is the psychological, but there is also the psychiatric perspective. But earlier, when you started out, you did say that this is a cycle, that the number of persons can't contemplate suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And you know that for all those who are watching now, the most private thing that you can ever entertain is a thought. It's the most private thing. So then the attempt, then the completion.
Yeah.
So how do we, first of all, interrupt this cycle in the first instance? The thoughts that would not arise in the first place, and then even the attempt.
We are all under pressure. Very important. We shouldn't shy away from that reality. Yeah. And let me say something about media education on suicide. In response, to what before I now address your question quickly.
Yes.
You see, I understand where, the psychiatrist was coming from.
It's a psychologist.
He's a psychologist, right?
Right.
Oh,
Yes.
that's
Like
nice.
yourself,
So,
yes.
So he was talking about copycat, behaviors. Yes, that people can, a kind of bandwagon effect. He doesn't want it to become a fad, a vogue, and people begin to key into it. However, public education is key. And it also comes to answer your question, how do we break the cycle? Public education is key. If you are just announcing that one more person has taken suicide, it may be wrong. It may be in tandem with where he is coming from. But you are taking it, a notch or two further by educating people on the causes and how they can get out of it. So the issue of copycat is also being addressed by the public education which you are bringing on. And that is how to break the cycle. People need to understand that, look, success is not permanent and failure is not final. There is no success, a level of success prepares you to work for higher order successes. Do you understand what I'm saying? And failure in itself is not really failure per se. It prepares you to be able to succeed the next time. How much of this education is going on now there? Do you get the point?
I do.
We need to get to address the issue of the unfairly globalizing world. People are lost in the maze of social media, right? People are communicating with people everywhere. The 8th continent now may be the internet because it's peopled by more than 2 billion people. Do you understand that? Perhaps the highest, the biggest in terms of, and it's a real society, it's a community.
So the world is becoming an animal farm sort of scenario.
Well, not just an animal farm, a global village. What Marshall McLuhan would call a global village. The world is even smaller than a village now. It's a palm top thing. What that means is that people are now exposed to things they were not exposed to before. People have access to barrage of information. And what they are reading, what they are viewing, you may not know. The question is, who is supposed to be checking on all those things? It goes back to the beginning, which is the family. I said earlier that the family is the foundation of it all. It's the foundation of life. We need to understand what the children are going through. We must know precisely what the problems are, what the problems they have as individuals, the problems they are experiencing in school. The school here is not just primary or secondary, up to university. I remember the case of Aziz in UNN. You know, the mother complained of the young man not being able to graduate because he couldn't go through with his project, right? An intervention could have come, assuming that is the actual problem. Yeah. If it's a problem, why not? Why not? You can find why he couldn't. If he could pass all his courses in 4 years in the university, project is not a big deal. It can be gotten through. So there must be a way of bridging this gap. We have to be out there. We have to be there for each other. There is this social support system, which we have all enjoyed as Africans, that is disappearing. Knowing that somebody is there for you, knowing that you have a shoulder to lean on, knowing that you have somebody to confide in, knowing that you have a problem and you can discuss it with your boss, you can discuss it with your mother, with your father. Some parents are not friends with their children. It's a big issue. A girl, for example, should be able to discuss with the mother about issues she will not be able to discuss with the father. Women affairs. A teenager, being disturbed by fellow teenagers to go out and stuff like that. A mother should be able to discuss such issues and discuss the dangers, how she should be able to go through it. If you don't, she will have to learn that from the peers out there. And you don't know the peers she is communicating with, she can be confused, and a social accident can occur. Pregnancy, right? And again, pregnancy occurs, the girl is scared to death discussing it with the parents, with the mother, and what happens? Death can occur. The womb can be damaged irreparably by attempts through quackery, right? In terminating the pregnancy. These are realities. And you come to societal level. We are no longer, I was listening to the CBN governor.
Have we lost our empathy for human life?
We have.
Support?
That's the point I made earlier about social support system that is disintegrating because of the changing world. To be honest, the parents themselves are even getting confused. Teachers are getting confused. They don't know what is what now, what is real now, because Nigerian educational system is no longer at par with the global educational system. Before now, in the 60s, 70s, even up to 80s, students from Nigerian educational institutions were at par, perhaps better, than their counterparts in the UK and US. In fact, our secondarians that left for university education in the US were placed in Ivy League universities. It's no longer so now. Even our certificates are suspect. So you can see that there has been a kind of diminution, of the value of education in Nigeria. Finally, what I think there has to be some kind of conscious plan to really break, right? To answer your question finally, to break, we have to get the youths to begin to talk to themselves, right? There is what is called mentoring in higher education. Mentoring is not the same thing as teaching. Mentoring is taking interest in the life and growth of another person. It's not there anymore. We must formally and officially introduce it in our academic system. In the universities, the students that committed suicide, it's obvious they don't have mentors. They have nobody they are talking to in the system there. And their parents are not there also for them. People should be able to know that something is happening. Somebody that used to be boisterous, lively, is all of a sudden withdrawing, avoiding social interactions. Somebody that used to be quiet, taciturn, all of a sudden is boisterous. It's also a red flag. You need to understand the issue of drugs. Drugs. When somebody who has never taken alcohol before, all of a sudden is hitting the bottles, something is wrong somewhere. Somebody who is trying, there are suicidal tendencies. You see some people zoom past you on these Abuja roads, 160, 180.
And I wonder where they're
So,
going.
do you understand that?
Yes.
That is suicidal. Any problem will result in death. There is no accident. There are some accidents you see in Abuja here. You'll be wondering what really happened.
I saw 3 accidents
Do you
this
understand
morning
that?
coming
Good.
here.
So that's the point I'm making. All those drastic changes in behavior, the drastic changes in behavior, those around must find out. Do you know people fall sick in their houses and nobody finds out? Do you know that people even die in their houses? It takes days for people to find out. Do you know that we don't know who our neighbors are?
Yes.
My brother, let me tell you something. Even if this is the last
My
thing.
sister, you are looking at my sister. Call her my sister.
My sister,
Yes.
listen, whoever is listening to me,
Yes.
please, if you don't have 3 to 6 persons that will be there for you through thick and thin, you have a problem.
Exactly.
Say it again.
If you don't have minimum of 2, perhaps maximum of 6, if you can make it more better, who will be there for you through thick and thin, you have a problem.
Wow. And mentally at the
How?
same time.
I'll tell you how.
Yes.
And
We
what?
are talking about having a shoulder to lean on, somebody to talk to, somebody to share with, right? We are social beings. We are social animals. No man is an island. We live in communities. And, that is the essence of division of labor. Walt Adam Smith, the classical economist, would say that the butcher does not, he is not there for you, for the love of you. He is there because of his consideration for his own stomach. He knows you will come and bring money. He'll give you meat. He'll use that money to buy Gary. That is how life is built. So if you isolate yourself, so much so that, you are stranded, you don't have anybody to run to. Do you understand that? We need, all of us, each and every one of, even billionaires need bailouts.
Yes.
Do you understand that?
Psychological bailout.
Yes, and it's not bailout here, doesn't have to be money.
No, that's why I said psychological.
Sure, we all need bailouts. We need to share ideas. Nobody knows it all.
But that's why some persons would argue that people are Nigerians, as it were, will become very religious. We are running to places of worship, and Professor Tafiq Abdul says, unfortunately, you have commercial religion these days, and the person you are coming to knows that you are a client and that they will tap from you. Let's return to our Lagos Network Center and bring in again Dr. Tony Sunbae, to join in the conversation. You've listened, to what the other guests have said. I'm just wondering, just before we get into the area of, say, professional psychological help, and why Nigerians are not patronizing psychologists or shrinks, as they used to call them in those days. Tell us something about our values, for instance, a measure of success. One thing that has not been mentioned, I'm sure we have all noticed it, all in the rat race for people to make money, you find young persons getting into gambling these days. Everybody, they are betting online, offline.
Betting their life away.
Everybody's just betting, just chasing money. Yahoo boys, Yahoo boys and Yahoo girls, everybody chasing money. And how do you measure success in the first instance? It looks like, if you don't have money, you are dead without money, as had the Chase Road in those days. But that necessarily isn't the case. So give us your own perspective on the misplacement of values in the first instance. And secondly, why professional help isn't readily coming from psychologists on account of low patronage.
The issue about the systemic degradation is what we now find and see, or the Yoruba had classified as Oladoyinbo, Kosomodoyinbo, Depopomasoebidoyinbo. In other words, thinking or having done these things, putting on ties, suits, or whatever, does not make you any better English person. And because we have a wrong orientation about life, sometimes we have an escape route of thinking that that is the foreign orientation that we have been exposed to. Yoruba people will say, If you are picking on vices, one or two, you will definitely hurt yourself with one. Having said all of this, there is need for us to look at it that for you to drive on any road anywhere in the world, you need a driver's license. For you to get married formally, you need a marriage license. But have we sat back to ask ourselves, who is giving parenting license? Who is orientating parents? And that is what led to my thinking that, I think some parents have no business with parenting. However, they will get into childbirth, and the accidental parenting life will have to continue. And that is why there are social institutions to assist in moderating or rehabilitating. But we are way, way, way backwards. Now getting to psychological services. Most Nigerians, they tend to think that there are no many psychologists in town. Yes, when you consider it to the population. However, there are psychologists in Nigeria, in private practice, in hospital setting, in the universities and various higher institutions. Don't let us forget that the national policy on education indicated that there should be counselors across all the levels of education in Nigeria, from primary to university. However, I want to say that more often than not, you find scratchy of these activities only in the university setting. We have forgotten that once the foundation is crooked, what else can you build on that? Whatever superstructure or whatever investment you have made on such crooked foundation, it's just a matter of time. It will crash, and that is what we are seeing. More often than not, those who are getting involved in betting and all that you mentioned, there are family dynamics, social issues, disintegration. It is not about broken homes. I think we should get that right. It is not about polygamy. We should get that right. Most people who are successful today, who are leaders or captains of industries today, at least by African setting, they more often than not, they are products of polygamy. So what is the hell that we are pointing accusing fingers to about polygamy? Whilst we were growing up, we should remember that there will always be somebody that was trustworthy, that will be at home to receive us as we come back from school. What do we have now? Dogs welcoming children, drivers taking over the care of effective parenting, drivers that you will not even pay as at when due. And why won't that one take over to take a pound of flesh? The house help that you will give only remnants of the meal that you have had instead of a wholesome meal. If he or she has an opportunity to lash back at the children or to disorientate them, how can you stop that? These are the dynamics that we need to look at. However, I should want to appeal that Nigerians explore the possibility, which is realistic, of using professionals and the priests of whatever religious leaning should try as much as possible to be honest with themselves and God and the God of their victims or clients to create a boundary. Even professionals, they create boundaries. Even at university levels, professors in the same department knows their boundaries. What am I talking about here is the capacity for referral services. Spirituality, from a psychologist's point of view, is different from religiosity. Most Nigerians are just religious. They are not spiritual. Take, for example, when you are doing business and you now want to say, God does not like what, don't bring God here. This is business. Can we classify such people as really thinking God-like when God is a rational being? when God is a fair dealer. So these are issues. We need to understand our boundaries and move our clients. Like I used to tell some of my junior colleagues, that referring to anybody outside of you for the client still adds back to you, because your client will be getting value. And value was what led the client to you in the first instance. So don't want to be one-stop shop, a know-all of a therapist. That will not do you any good. Sooner than later, the client will see that this person is cosmeticing, and it doesn't make sense. And like I used to appeal to clients and say, hey, at any time that you feel that you are not getting what you desire from me, you have a right to tell me, as much as if I feel that I'm not moving as fast as I should with you in this therapeutic relationship, I will tell you and I can refer you. So either of us can cut the relationship, but we should let us know that this is what had happened. So professionally, a psychologist is not about maybe underperformance. It's not about broken down hearts or inability of an individual to deliver. Those who are even doing well, they can be assisted to do better. And the core focus of psychology as a discipline is not essentially only therapeutic situation. Preventive and social or what we call psychoeducation is an essential ingredient. Prevention anywhere in the world is still better and more preferred than cure. So these are the dynamics that we are losing sight of, which we need to key into. And for us to checkmate almost immediately suicide in Nigeria, I still stand by the publicizing cases, not reporting. I'm not saying that it should not be reported at appropriate institutional level so that we can have data. But giving unwholesome publicity, you and I can decide that I will not further spread suicidal information or suicidal issues, albeit unnecessarily. So this is my thinking. Psychologists are available. Psychologists and psychological bill was passed by the last National Assembly, awaiting the assent. I don't know whether it has been assented by President Buhari. But if we really mean that Nigerians should have capacity to perform, there is need for psychological services from primary school to solve social problems, to solve personal problems. There are these children, some of them will feel that some of their friends are having better access to money than them, which we need to reorientate the child to understand that the sources of income or socioeconomic status of parents differ and vary, and probably invite the parents of the children who are coming to flaunt all this luxury in the school so that they can reduce such and thus reduce temptation. Let me let you know that anybody who feels inferior, what we call inferiority complex, is having a psychological problem. Anybody who is feeling superior to another person, classifying another person as okeresi number me, is having psychological problems. The ideal or healthy psychological thinking is, you are okay, I am okay. So a psychologist will not sign on to a paper of Obajebe Owosi. Chop off the Owosi and see that you will now see that, that left hand has value, and it is indeed very valuable. So this.
Dr. Sunbae, thank you very much. We have a torrent of tweets from our viewers who would like to contribute to, and indeed have contributed to this conversation. We'll take those tweets now, and then we'll take a short break, and if we still have enough time, we'll get a closing thoughts from our guests. Ogochukwu tweets: people should learn how to open up whenever they have issues and burdens. Thinking about it all the time leads to depression, and depression likely leads to suicide.
Yes, and Daily Jack Solomon tweets, let government at all levels, corporate organizations and individuals provide the enabling environment for economic growth, create job opportunities, ensure security, social amenities, healthcare services, lower the cost of living, and see suicide tendencies disappear in Nigeria.
Musa Hadeja tweets, some suicide cases are related to drug abuse, while others are caused by frustration from parents and organizations, which therefore leads to increase in suicide cases.
And Ibrahim Tadu tweets, there are so many causes of suicide. It all depends on how one responds to them. It happens in developed and underdeveloped countries. It is the responsibility of parents, leaders, and religious institutions. We must change our ways now.
Sonny Michael Amakoje, it's sad that some persons now see suicide as an alternative to frustration. However, while condemning the act like suicide in strong terms, we must investigate the root causes such as unemployment, low standard of living, and other social issues. Government should provide jobs and make life better.
And
that's Jumoy Tabak.
Yes, Jumoy Tabak. Yes, my namesake. The gullible die in their folly. Our society is so corrupt and totally morally decadent. We talk of riches all the time. The federal government should call for national suicide prevention strategy of mental health. The National Assembly should do the needful.
Sorry, that's one that has a handle that says the revolution is coming. That's the handle from which he or she has sent this to. It says, apart from the spiritual roles in suicide, which will obviously be criticized, a lot of the youth are bored in Nigeria because there's nothing to look forward to. Who says?
And Omogbala Babs tweets, a critical look at suicidal cases has a link to drug addiction, and addiction itself is a corollary of systematic decay and failure of leadership, lack of parental care, as well as moral decadence, which is now at the apogee. We must take a holistic approach to solving the menace. We have so many tweets that came in
Billy
today.
Jack Solomon says Nigeria currently lacks the infrastructure to deal with mental health problems. We need to set up networks to help people suffering from mental health. Also, we need to build more health facilities and counseling system that will include national helplines. That's to say, a telephone number you can call and have a conversation. There are others. This is from Chris Simeon, that we have Ibirogba Adewale. Let's take this one from Ibirogba Adewale. It says, Professor Tafiq and the doctor in the studio have said it all, because since I left NYSC now, getting job is another threat to my heart. But I don't think suicide is the next thing to do.
And Chris Simon, again, for the depressed people who lost someone, valuable access, special counseling center should be created for them by the government and NGOs. And there are so many tweets.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Danladin, Dayebo, Ibrahim Moduaji, that's Ibrahim Moduaji says those caught trying to commit suicide should be punished to serve as a deterrent to others. Lack of proper punishment brings about upsurge in the menace. No reason for one to take his own life. Absolutely. But the truth is that in law, a person who commits suicide is beyond justice. But attempted suicide is an offense. All right, so those are the tweets that we can accommodate. In the meantime, we'd like to thank you for sending in your tweets, and also to our guests who've been with us. Unfortunately, we are going to have to go over to our sports desk to take some comprehensive package. So we'll leave it at this, and then hope that, of course, the comprehensive issues that our guests have raised this morning will form matter for subsequent conversations, as well as how to, in tandem with our title for discussion this morning, Checkmate Suicide in Nigeria. On that note, we'd like to thank all our guests. Professor Tafiq Abdul Aziz is a professor of English, also a fish farmer. He speaks English to his fish. And is also the chief imam of the University of Abuja Muslim Community. Professor Abdul Aziz, thank you very much for being with us.
Welcome.
Deep thanks also to Lord Mefor. Dr. Lord Mefor, of course, is a forensic and social psychologist, a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Thank you for being around.
Thank you.
Deep thanks to Reverend Father Silvano of the Catholic Archdiocese of Abuja. Thank you for being around. From Lagos, we're joined by Dr. Tony Sunbae, a psychologist, who joined us from our Lagos Network Center. Dr. Sunbae thank you for being on our program. You didn't tell us, though, what it would cost for a session to be with a psychologist and how that cost might be taken care of under this thing. So, all right. So, at some point, of course, we'll see how all of that will go so that somebody doesn't find an alternative to say, look, why go to a professional psychologist if I can deal with this on my own? Self-medication is a major challenge we also face. Let's go now to our sports desk.
That's Good Morning Nigeria today. Join us tomorrow for another edition. I am Jumbo Yusuf.
Juma, are you coming tomorrow? Well, tomorrow?
Actually, see you Monday.
Yeah, tomorrow is Saturday. Good Morning Nigeria.
And I'm really going to enjoy my Saturday.
Absolutely.
I'm going to sleep. I'm going to rest.
All right.
Yes.
So, Good Morning Nigeria runs from Monday to Friday. 7 a.m. to just before 9 a.m. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. We're back on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, enjoy your day and have a wonderful weekend ahead of you. I'm Kingsley.
Bye.